So welcome back to another My Personal Football Coach podcast, Coaching Family Special. And we've got another part of our special, the Next Generation Coaches. Very proud to have Kai Parkinson joining us. Kai, how you doing, mate?
I'm all good. Thank you for having me, Saul.
Kai, look, first, can you give us a brief outline of your playing and coaching journey up to this point, just very briefly?
So I was fortunate enough to play at a decent level growing up. I played at a lot of various academies, Chelsea being probably one of the better ones out of all of them. Learned a lot of stuff along the way, worked with lots of different managers, met a lot of people in the game who have had a lot of experience, and I think that helped me pave the way in a journey that I'm doing now with my coaching. And then I started coaching at 18? Started coaching at 18 years old. Was in between playing and coaching at the time. Just got released, tried to play semi-pro whilst coaching and trying to build a coaching career. And then the last place, I ended up going on trial at Bolton Wanderers at 22. And then, it didn't work out. Then after that, I sort of just focused and put all my eggs in one basket in the coaching thing. And at that time, I was working at West Ham Foundation. So I sort of, grew from that.
So how old are you now, Kai?
So I'm 28 now.
28. So you got like a big following on Instagram, but I think it's it's important to say that look, particularly from my perspective as a coach, like Instagram's a really powerful tool. So it can obviously it's good for your business stuff like that, but also shows what sort of coaches are doing, and your work stood out for me for a long time, because I say for everyone, the players you work with are like your walking portfolio basically. So you work with a lot of players, you can see your sessions, they're really good. You're doing stuff in the right way, inverted commas, and obviously I've got confirmation bias, the right way I believe. Like you seem like a very skillful technical coach. You emphasize those parts of the game. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and in your own words, tell us about your coaching methodology? What is it, and how did you get there?
Yeah, so I was a very technical player growing up, relied a lot on technique, and I think that's just I'm very, I don't know, I'd say I'm more drawn to the technical side of the game, and I think it's an important part of, especially in today's day and age, being technical. It's a massive part, and I think it starts from the youngest of ages. You look at it now, how many young players, or the stat that showed the England squad, the amount of players that were playing in that squad who were signed to clubs at the age of under 9 and up. I think the technical element's such an important part of the game, and obviously, look, I've always been a big fan of yourself as well, and we probably have the same methodology with the ball mastery stuff, teaching kids combinations, keeping the ball close to their feet, being comfortable and dominant on the ball. So I think for me, the ball mastery side, that's one of the biggest strengths a kid can have, just being able to master the ball and dominate the game. For me, that's probably one of my biggest philosophies that I try to embed with all the players that come and train with me.
Yes, that's really interesting. So thanks for those kind words. But I mean, in terms of like your own thing, that's what I'm always interested in. Like, I see you guys, you young coaches, you put on these great sessions, you're getting amazing results, with top players. So my question is, how do you get there? That's like, I want to understand your journey in terms of you realise you're a technical player, you want to get these outcomes, but then putting that into sessions is a different thing, isn't it? I mean, that's what thing is like. You got the concept. But you need to then put it into practice, and that's not easy. That's not an easy thing, in terms of like, particularly where the coaching qualifications work here. They're very much more emphasis on the game based stuff, which is okay, which is good as well, but maybe not as much emphasis on the technical ball mastery, individual stuff. So I'm interested in like, how do you get to that? How do you get to a point where obviously you're recognised now as one of the best young up and coming coaches around in terms of working with those academy players, those aspiring academy players, and you've got a very successful business. How do you get to that point to then putting it into practice and creating that methodology on yourself?
Do I think it's more based around scenarios and situations. So where I do a lot of 1v1s and 1v2s and 2v1s and 2v2s, I like to do a lot of small group-based stuff. So I might have a big group, so a session of 15, 16, but then it will be a lot of repetition, focusing mainly on, so it might be 1v1 facing the player up. Are you imagining in the game what part of the pitch you're in when attacking and trying to get at your player? Are you able to unbalance him with body feints and skills? Are you able to change your speed? So being able to go through the gears, and just being free and being comfortable, trying new things. 'Cause I think, look, we know you've worked in the academy and you've seen it. And I think nowadays, especially, parents are so strict on kids in terms of performance, performance, performance. I think a massive part of performance is kids having freedom and expressing themselves, making a mistake and not being afraid to go and try it again. Look, we see some of the top players that are playing now in the game. A lot of them players might have come from playing in the cages and not having as much pressure, and just trying new things with being comfortable on the ball, trying new skills that they might not necessarily try in a game because it might not work and they're worried about making a mistake. So I think it's more about them situations of 1v1s and 1v2s and 2v1s and different scenarios where you got pressure behind you, pressure in front of you, looking at how they can try and use different ways. Everyone has different dribbling styles. Like we see some players who are explosive dribblers. We see other players who are dribblers that might want to hold on to the ball and buy some time and wait for that gap or that opening to go and combine with another player. So I think it's more about finding different situations and scenarios in games that we can sort of work on in small little 1v1 and 2v1 little environments. So it's working on the player individually.
Yeah, interesting. And you made a couple of really interesting points there. One was obviously you talked about those experiences in cages, that sort of street football, isn't it? And I've always argued that. Even my first role at Tottenham, I said we want to recreate the street outcomes in our sessions. And some people say, well, why don't you just let them play? Well, the times are different. Kids aren't playing on the street anymore. They maybe not playing those cage environments, but they haven't got hours and hours to play every day, haven't they? So my argument's always been to condense that into an intense, high intensity ball mastery session, those quality touches, those guided touches, but also, like you say, those scenarios, those 1v1 scenarios you're going to get in the cages, right? And recreate that ambience of street football. What do you think about that, and how else can you do that in your sessions?
Yeah, I think it's a massive part of the street football aspect of the game today. Is such a big factor in today's game. You look at all the players, centre backs are comfortable on the ball. You've got wingers who are obviously comfortable on the ball. I think being comfortable on the ball in every position right now is a common fact. Even as a keeper, being good with your feet and being able to be comfortable under pressure is a big part. But what I try to do especially is I don't have obviously all academy players in my session. Sometimes I'll have some grassroots players who are good trainers and players who have potential, and maybe they need obviously a bit more work technically. But one thing with them is that they will give you realistic pressure in training for you to try and use your skills or use your body feints or whatever it is that you need to do. So I just think being in an environment where it's realistic is an important. I like to do the unopposed, but there's only so much unopposed you can do, especially with younger kids, because I've seen it happen a lot where so many younger kids are doing a lot of unopposed, but they're not really knowing how and when to use those skills that they're being taught. And I think sometimes as well, kids are overdoing skills at times. Like there's times where they've already beat the man and then they'll be going back to try and beat the man again, when they just need to understand the effectiveness of what you're being taught and putting it into practice to become the most effective player you can be. That's the most important part of it. So I just think the opposed pressure in a 1v1 and a 1v2 or a 2v1, that's the important part. And just being in an environment where people are hungry to train and give you that real pressure for you to deal with, and just use different tools in your toolbox.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I mean, I always say the same. Like, people always associate me with working unopposed, but I say, look, if you look at any of my group sessions, I'll do, maybe 10, 15 minutes max of the unopposed, the real quality ball work, but then it's 1v1s, it's 2v2s, 3v3s, like I say, 2v1s, because that's the key when it's working those optim, isn't it? And also, like I tell us a lot, one doesn't work without the other. People say, and I think it's, and I was listening to this interesting book the other day, same thing, everyone's like, it's you're either one camp or the other camp. In reality, it's a combination, it's a mix. It's about when and where and to work effectively. It's a great point. I mean, and I think that's a big misunderstanding about technical coaches like us. Like we say, we understand when and where and when's appropriate, to do things. You made a good point earlier about the difference as well in players. It's a really good point, and I want to just talk about that. I mean, like you say, like players are all different, whether they're 8 or 18, people have different assets, people have different profiles, if you want to call them that, isn't it? So it's like some players are really effective, are playing, in a 6, maybe they don't have the athleticism to get beyond and run. I went to the Southampton game on Saturday to watch United. I was watching Rashford, and he's so devastating in terms of running beyond players, and almost he wants to give the ball away quick so he can just get beyond. It's interesting, isn't it? The 1v1 works so differently in so many different ways, and how you construct your sessions. You've got someone like that, and then you've got someone maybe just tries to, in the middle, can get it and move it quickly and pop it and stuff like that. And that's another element of 1v1. So, like you said earlier, 1v1 is essential if you want to play any decent sort of level of football these days. But it looks different as a centre-back, as a midfielder, as a winger, and I understand to do that. So tell us a bit more about how you do that in your sessions. How do you work that in? How do you support individual players, like you say, with those different profiles, those different qualities, and how do you make sure you're hitting all those bases and making sure everyone fulfills their potential?
So it's like, when we do a 1v, look, you said it just now about different positions require different elements of the dribbling aspect. So when we're doing like a 1v1 drill, and look, I get my defence, so the players who play defence now, because as we know, we can't give kids a structured position at the youngest ages. Like, look, Carl Walker ended up going from being a striker during his old youth setup to becoming arguably one of the best right backs in the world. But when we do our 1v1s, I don't expect some of the players who I'd look at as a centre-back, I don't look at them and say they're going to have the same success as maybe a player that plays in a 7 or 11 when they're going 1v1 and attacking, to break out either way, going left or right. But what I do look at is the transition aspect. So when a player wins the ball, when they win that ball, how do they break out on the transition? So yeah, after they regain possession, they've got their body and their arm across the player. How well and how comfortable are they when they're breaking out and driving out with the ball? Also look at transition. So when we're doing 1v2s and the 2 defenders win the ball, the movement to quickly open the space up, and how well you do that. Are you understanding that your movement gives that player on the ball time and space to then make a decision? You could also be the decoy that player uses to use his turn to go out the other way. And I think it's always about explaining scenarios and relating it to games. Because I said, that's what I like to challenge as well. I challenge the kids with questions about, did you see in the game on the weekend when, or I'll say, did anyone watch the game on the weekend? And then someone will say yes. And I'll say, did you see when someone like Saka, there was a moment in the England game when Saka just backpedaled and let the ball run into his path, and he beat someone with one touch just down the line. But again, we were just talking about body shape, first touch, getting into the space and exploiting the space, eliminating that defender that's coming pressed high. So yeah, different players will have different just drive-by. So I just pull them out and just speak to them and say, oh, how could you have done this differently? And every player will have different things that I'll talk about based on their playing type. So an explosive winger, I'll be telling him, look, when there's a 1v2, you want to try and eliminate that 1v1 as quickly as possible to not allow that recovering player to get back in. But then when the recovering player does get back in, do you have the composure then to be in control and dictate the 2 defenders and maybe look for a gap or an opening with your dribbling to then exploit and break the line? So yeah, just different. Everyone will have different targets and different feedback just based on their playing profile and what the potential player looks like in the future based on maybe physical attributes.
And how you mentioned that about, looking at Saka in the game. I mean, I just mentioned Rashford there. I think it's really important, in terms of coach development and session design, isn't it? How important is it for you, is looking at the modern game, looking at top players, and then, as part of your development, as part of your education, as part of your session design, bringing that back?
You know what? That's probably one of the looking at modern players. Every parent and every kid should be looking at a player that is similar to their kid's style. So we'd say, who's a prime example? Someone like Sancho. Sancho's got great dribbling, great feet, but Sancho's not absolutely rapid. So he's not someone that you'd say, oh, let's get him running in behind every time. Whereas you might have a kid who looks absolutely rapid that can maybe run in behind and do things. And look, you just be maybe telling that kid about how can he use give and goes in these games when the pitch opens up, but still explaining the importance of being able to master the ball and stay on the ball, because that's an important part of it. So I think, yeah, just the different, giving different bits of information for different players and looking at what the kid looks like, what the future looks like of that kid. That's a big part, because look, there's who can I use as Josh Cullen, who plays for Burnley. I was fortunate enough to see Josh, for example, playing as a young player. Josh is 2 years younger than me, but someone like him, he's got great ability to hold on to the ball and manipulate the ball, but his dribbling wouldn't be the same as, say, a Marcus Rashford, who's a bit more explosive when he does his dribbling. Marcus Rashford will look for the give and go. His one's more of a Iniesta type of dribble, where it's draw players in. As I've drawn them in, I might play the pass into the gap that I've drawn them out from. And I think, parents have to just look at their kid and it's hard to explain, but you'll probably know it as well as a coach. You can sort of look at a kid at the age of 8, 9, 10, 11. You look at how they move. You maybe look at the size of the parent, what their future player profile looks like, and you try to just mold them into the best version of themselves, but also a player that looks quite similar to them at the highest level.
Yeah, interesting. And then, tell us about then your sessions. Give us what an average session would look for. How long is your session? An hour, 90 minutes? And tell us what an average one would look for. How to set it up.
The session's an hour and 15 minutes. Sometimes it goes over if Power League let me use the pitch for a little bit longer. So depending on if there's anyone on after us, if someone's on after us, we get kicked off. But we'll always start off with some unopposed. So unopposed, so ball juggling. So we do ball mastery in the air, do it on the floor. We go into some unopposed work as well. So like different skills, different combinations that maybe they could use in the 1v1s, the 1v2s. I'm quite lucky to have 2 top keepers or 3 top keepers that are always in my sessions. So when we do like the 1v1 work or the 2v2 work, there's always keepers there. So it gives them that the chance to obviously get some shots off as well, create half a yard of space, rebounds, transition. But there's always an unopposed into an opposed, and then we always finish with a game at the end. And sometimes the games will have conditions, just to channel the players and get them to think about what they can do differently in the game. And then just the competition base at the end. Like, look, all kids love games, and obviously games are important, because you'll see some kids who might not be good in drills, but then in a game, when it really matters, they come out and dominate and shine. But then you also see some kids who are really good in drills and really good in the 1v1 stuff and 1v2 stuff, and then when it comes into a game and there's more players on the pitch and there's more decisions to make, they sort of struggle to make the right decision at that time. So I think, just that whole session of having a bit of everything gives that real balance to going into what certain kids need to work on. And if there is any weaknesses, then you can sort of highlight it and say, you need to be doing this better, or I think you can maybe next time try and do this. And look, it's all about the hours at the end of the day. The hours and the repetition and the consistency, that's what breeds pure development.
Yeah, interesting. And so what about, tell us about yourself then. You mentioned you're a technical player. Tell us about your own development, about the academy. We talked briefly before we did the show about. Tell us about your time, particularly at Chelsea. I mean, talk about that, because obviously at the time the juggernaut in English football was talk about that. They were the big players now. Man City's challenging whatever. People they spend the most money in that academy. They wanted to be the biggest and the best in terms of investment. Not a lot of teams got next to them. Tell us about your time at Chelsea, how it came about, what the main takeaways you had, what other sorts of players were you around, and coaches and stuff like that.
Yeah, so at Chelsea, I was around a lot of top players. So in my group, there was Lewis Baker. That's probably one that people would probably know right now. There was John Swift, Nate, so Nathaniel Chalobah. He's obviously, I don't know where Nate's playing now at the moment. He was at West Brom previously. I don't know if he might still be at West Brom. In the younger ages, there was players like Charlie Colkett, Ola Aina, some really top player, Jeremy Boga. So just look, seeing loads of different players, obviously at that younger age, you get to see what the highest level of talent looks like. And then just being in that environment, I said Chelsea was probably the best environment in terms of it's the best of the best. And when you're around the best of the best, the level's always top tier. And Chelsea, for me, the facilities, the schedule, the structure, you can only get better playing in that environment. And I was fortunate enough to train with the likes of Steve Holland. Steve Holland done a few sessions with us. Frank O'Brien, who was top, AD Virash.
I think AD's world class. By the way, I've had him on the show, and just his mentality, and his awe of him is top, and he's top drawer.
Because when I was there, AD was the 16s manager at the time, but you could just tell straight away he's a top. He's a top manager. And I think, where's AD now? Coventry.
I think he might have left Coventry this season. I think this season's not there. He was there previously with Mark Robbins. I'm not sure if he's still there this year, but he's top.
Yeah, he's top. Just the details and just the energy and the passion that these guys obviously give across. And I think at the time Joe was there as well. Is it Joe Lyons?
Joe Edwards.
No, not Joe Edwards. Joe Edwards. Sorry, Joe Edwards.
Yeah, Joe top as well. Yeah.
Joe's now first. Is he first? He was first team with.
Well, he was at Millwall, wasn't he? He was first team. He was with Lampard, and he went to Millwall recently, and then he left. He was first team head coach at Millwall, and he left, didn't he, a few months back?
Yeah.
So now, but he's again another top.
There was a lot of top people, and obviously Darren Grace was there at the time. Jim Fraser. There's just a lot of top people, and I think that environment and the culture that they breed was a winners. Everything was a winners mentality. So everything, and I think that's the biggest thing for me, giving kids a champion's mindset to want to always be the best, have a winners mentality. It breeds success, and that's the one thing I try to embed with a lot of the kids that I train with. That winners mentality, and just wanting to be the best. Training, look, it doesn't matter about who you train with, and I think this is another thing for parents. I think they think that if you train with the best players, you're going to automatically become the best player, and I think it's more about your own kid's mindset. If they go into a session knowing that they can get the full benefits from it, they're going to get the full benefits. Whereas if they go into a session looking at it and thinking, all the players here they're not top tier, they sort of go into the session already with a mindset of, I don't need to give 100% today because all the players here are not on my level. So I think that mindset, having a champion's mindset and wanting to raise the bar, wanting to set the standard, wanting to be that one that people look at and say, look at him. Because I think you've probably seen it as well in the game, like, there's so many top young players, and parents almost look at these top young players and say, my kid needs to be like that. And it's good to look at someone and have a bar, but you need to focus on your kid's journey, and everyone has a different time of development. I've seen so many boys at Chelsea who should be playing in the Premier League right now, but unfortunately with luck and opportunity, they're maybe not playing where they should be playing. And I think it's just important for parents to focus on their own kid's journey, and look, if there's a time to move or there's a time to go somewhere, when the time's right, you got to move on and do it. Otherwise, that opportunity that's come might not be there again in the next 2-3 years. And you got to look at your own kid, and just, don't focus on who's in and around sessions or who's there. Just focus on your kid's journey.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, it's like, they were saying at Chelsea when I was there, they said, the toughest games will be the games in training every week, because, like you say, the level's so high at Chelsea in terms of so many top players there. It was that competitive cauldron just drives everyone on. And I can imagine if I experienced that as a coach, as a player, you must have experienced that as well. But then tell us about that, and when you get released from Chelsea. I know you talked about this before. I mean, what was that like in terms of coming away from football for yourself as someone who's been immersed in academy football, and that's your life, and then suddenly that's not your life anymore?
It's hard. Like when I obviously got released, I said it before about you go from training almost 3 to 4 times a week, like with a game on a Sunday, to then, look, lucky enough, I had the opportunity to go to so many other clubs. So every week I was maybe going up north to a club, maybe going to like West Brom, then going to Liverpool, then so I was fortunate enough to go to other teams on trial. But when it really hits you and there's nothing concrete, and the environment at Chelsea is such a perfect environment in terms of, how it is, that you get the kit, the training facilities are top, you get your packed lunch after training. It's such a perfect environment. When you come away from that, because I then eventually signed with Peterborough, and you go from training at Cobham, and at the time Peterborough were using it was like a Royal Navy training ground, because I think their training ground was being built. So it was a struggle in terms of just going into that environment and just the training facility, the coaching. The coaching wasn't the same as what it was at Chelsea. So yeah, it's hard mentally, and I think that's the important part of, look, people like us, we're not only coaches, but we're almost mentors as well. The way how we have these conversations with kids and we speak about life, we speak about performances. I know you work with someone like Noni, and look, when he went having his moment at Chelsea, or he's in and out of the squad, I know you could probably do a session with him and speak to him about just keeping your head, keep waiting for your opportunity, keep doing all the right things you need to do, because your chance is going to come. And I think that's what I've taken away from this whole, not negative experience, but an experience that didn't work. I sort of take the positives away. And look, a lot of the boys I spoke about a boy called Junior Chamadou, who got released from Charlton, and then he went to Colchester, and he was a bit heartbroken he's heartbroken getting released. But I said to him, the positive factor is you're going to go to Colchester and they are going to prioritise you and play you in the first team. And when you get minutes in the first team at the age of 17, 18, other players are still only playing under 18s football. You've played men's, you got appearances in the league, which is going to go for you. And I look at him now, and there's boys that were in that Charlton squad that got offered scholarships, and they're now 20 years old and they haven't got a club. Whereas he, at 20 years old, got a move to Stoke City in the Championship, and he's now playing consistent football. So I think just that positive mindset of, look, the rejection sometimes brings out the best in us all, because it gives us a point to prove and makes us want to work harder. And I just think that a lot of young kids, when you get released from an academy environment, it's part of your life. Every day is part of your life. You go to school in the evening, you've got training. By the time you get home, it's time to go sleep, and then the next day it's almost repeat. But then the minute that football's gone, it's like in the evenings, what do I do now? Like, I've got time on my hands. And then you'll go to a session elsewhere, and the session may not be as good. It's not as good as what it was when you're in the academy. And I think that's the difficult part. But there's people like myself, yourself. There's other coaches out there that are doing their stuff. We have environments that sort of give the kids an opportunity to stay fit and keep playing and keep working hard. And yeah, I think the mentality bit is the most important bit when you get released.
Yeah, and what's your own hopes for the future? I mean, do you aspire to work in elite footballers, coaching an academy or first team, or where do you want to take the business?
Do you know, at the moment I'm still thinking about it. I don't know whether I'm going to go into a different part of working football, or whether I'm going to still coach, doing what I'm doing. But I don't think I'll go into a club, simply because I think just working with a club, it limits the amount of time I get to have with all the ages that I work with. Because I'm quite fortunate enough to work with ages from 10 up to first team players. And I think if I go and work for a club, that sort of it will limit my time of what days I can do sessions, what ages I can sort of reach. As you know, academies, obviously, they all train on different days and things like that. So I think right now I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing with my business. Hopefully keep creating players and give them the best opportunity to develop, and yeah, just hopefully keep creating some more stars of the future.
Yeah, I think the environment's changed from when I started 20 years ago, when it was almost essential that you had to work in academy football to get your reputation and get out there. Whereas I think social media's changed that. We can see the evidence of what you're doing, the quality of what you do. You're developing methodologies different, because we can see it day to day in the players you're working with and stuff like that. So I think it's interesting to do that. I think it's a new world out there, and you should be obviously well done, because it's a saturated world, isn't it? Let's talk about that for a little bit. It's not easy. I get the question all the time. I'm just starting up coaching. What's the tips you got? Because you developed yourself, you developed a methodology, a brand from scratch, which is remarkable, and a successful business with a real successful Instagram following. So what would your advice be to coaches starting up who want to try and get to the point where you are already at 28?
I would say, first of all, you need a platform. So look, for me, my platform at the time was West Ham Foundation in the community. Now, I never ever thought that I'd be this. Look, I'm a good coach. People say I'm a top coach, but I never thought I'd be in this bracket. When I started at West Ham Foundation, and I was in between playing semi-pro and coaching at the time, and I was 50-50. And I think my coaching, I used to attract a lot of good players simply because at West Ham Foundation, look, the the people used to look at it and think, oh, it's West Ham. So I used to get a lot of raw talent who thought it was the West Ham Academy or thought it was like a place where I can get a trial at West Ham. But then people started coming and sort of respecting me for me as a coach, not the badge I was wearing. And that's when I started getting some of the boys that were training with me, were at academies at the time. They just saw it as a way to do some extra training. That's when I sort of made that relationship with, I don't know, Amadou Diallo, who's now moved to Bordeaux at the moment. Amadou's top player. I sort of built my name from then. And after I used that platform as a way to build my name, I got made redundant by West Ham during the lockdown. And that was when, that was a turning point for me. A lot of the boys I was working with at the foundation or that done sessions with me obviously had nowhere to train. We just went to Central Park, like it was a park near my house, obviously in the area. Had minimal equipment at the time, like literally minimal equipment. Just had like a few balls, some cones. And then when we started, we just started doing just the normal stuff we do in a session. But we started doing 1v1s, and look, some of the players that I have are all those entertaining players that you'd say on the ball. They bring something different. So there was like Leo Black, who's now playing for England and Spurs. Samuel Amo, who's now playing for Southampton and England as well. Then Amadou Diallo was there. Junior Chamadou was there. There was other players like Callum Cisse at the time was at Tottenham. He's now playing for Wealdstone. He's another top player. But there was a lot of top players there. Shaden Morris at Aberdeen. And we were just doing 1v1s, lots and lots of 1v1s, just repetition. And look, I just started videoing it because I was just like, man, some of these, like, everyone was looking sharp. And when obviously we was recording them, I just started like posting it on Instagram, started tagging them. They started obviously reposting, and all of a sudden it just spreads. That, you know how social media is now. But I never ever done it for that intention to say I want to grow and I want people to see me. It was more just for the culture and the vibes and the enjoyment, because when we do it's out of enjoyment. When we're playing football and we're training and we're doing these 1v1s, the boys are loving it. And that's what I try to embed in these kids. You've got to really love going 1v1 with a player. Like, you've got to enjoy trying to beat a player every time. You've got to enjoy holding on to the ball. You've got to enjoy getting tackled and seeing it as a privilege to get fouled. And I think that's how it sort of came about. And then after that, I then started to structure like the age groups and the session days. And then from there, it just started to grow more and more. But I was never a fan of social media. Maybe why I didn't grow as quick as maybe I should have before. But I just done it to just show people like that I'm coaching, that I do. Obviously, I coach good players. I'm a good coach, and yeah, and that's it, to be fair. And then the rest, obviously, luckily, it's grown, and people know me now, and I'm doing my thing. I've got good relationships with clubs. I can help as many players as I can. I think that's the main thing for me. I just try to help as many people as I can, and just from different levels, and yeah, just try and grow with these boys and see some of them make it to the highest level, and hopefully they remember me and appreciate everything I've done for them.
That's top, mate. And it's interesting, is because you talked about getting released from Chelsea and that inspiring you, but also you almost got released from West Ham because of that, the COVID.
Yeah, literally. That's
inspired you to create this great thing, what you're doing. So well done. Just find this course. We've got to wrap it up in a minute. Let's talk about Rio. Someone we both know very well. I've worked with Dr. Well for when I was at Chelsea. He's done little bits with me and with my personal coach as well. You work with Rio now. He's obviously made that big move to Liverpool. I mean, I was on a podcast with like Redman TV just before this, talking about him. Just like what a fantastic player in terms of talent, but in terms of his mentality and his mindset and wanting to be the best. So just talk a bit about Rio. You've worked with him quite a lot as well. Talk about what sort of player he is and what Liverpool can expect.
Yeah, so Rio Ngumoha, everyone knows right now, obviously, since there's been more posts about him, and his brother sort of kept him off social media throughout his whole like youth phase. Rio is a top talent, and for me, he's one of the best players I've personally ever seen. That's coaching, playing. He's like his ability on the ball and the speed he travels at with the ball. He's ruthless determination to want to beat players over and over and over again. He's a special talent, and look, Liverpool are, man, he's gonna if Rio can live up to everything, all the hype that's around him, and if he gets the opportunity to do what he's good at, he's going to be a star for England in the future, man, and for Liverpool as well. I think they've got a superstar in their hands at the moment.
Top, mate. Listen, Kai, thanks very much, mate. Top. George, just finally, just tell us where people can find you. Give us like your socials, your platforms and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I'm on social media, official __ Kai. And yeah, that's all I'm on for now. But so, thank you for having me, man.
Pleasure, man. Top drawer, next generation coaches, man. Pleased to have you. Take care, mate.